Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Sam and I make tip and tutorial videos every week to help you improve your art. This week I'm going to be sharing 8 tips which I think are really helpful to help you improve your colour pencil drawings. So the first tip is to invest in some really good quality pencils. Now these don't have to be the most expensive pencils on the market, and of course it's fine to buy cheaper pencils to begin with just to kind of get your hand in, but it won't be long until you find that these are frustrating. You're not going to get the depth of colour that you are looking for, and if you really want to improve your art, then the tools are sometimes the best way to do that. It just makes the job a lot easier. So I did a lot of research to begin with, and the first set of pencils that I bought were the Faber-Castell Polychromos, and you can get some really good deals on Amazon and different art supplies. Jackson's is fantastic. I started with a set of 36 in a tin. They're really good quality, they're nicely made, and they are really strong, the wood. So the most important thing for me, I'm a little bit clumsy, I tend to drop my pencils, and what tends to happen with these is that because they are glued in the casement, then only the very tip of the pencil tends to break, not breaking across the whole pencil, which would happen with cheaper pencils. The other thing to think about with buying your coloured pencils is whether you want to sell your work, and if you do, it's really important that you buy pencils that are light fast, which means they don't fade over time. Some of the other ones like the Prismacolors, they don't have a very good light fastness rating, and so they will fade over time if they're in sunlight. Tip number 2 is to get decent quality paper. Now for ages I used the kind of cheap sketchbooks, and that's fine, but it didn't take long for me to realise that you're not going to be able to layer as much the colour pencils as you need to. So when I moved on to slightly better quality, slightly more expensive paper, I used this. It's the De La Roni smooth heavyweight paper, so it's really quite thick. It is quite smooth, which some people aren't going to like with the colour pencils because it doesn't have much tooth. It's great to start off with because I found that the graininess of the paper, and not knowing many techniques, I was getting frustrated that the graininess of the paper was still showing through. So with the smoother papers, that doesn't happen as much. You're not going to get as much layers, but to begin with, just one thing at a time. The other one that I used a lot of is the Bristol board. This is the vellum surface, which you can get lots of different ones. I think you can get airbrush, you can get smooth, and then you can get the kind of more textured papers. Now recently I've discovered, I've seen a lot of artists use it in the past, but the Fabriano Artistico watercolour hot pressed £300 I think paper, which is, I've got to say, my new favourite. It's on the more expensive side, but oh my god, it's a game changer. It really does make such a difference to your colour pencil drawings. The great thing is that it's a different texture on either side. So if you like a smoother finish, you can use one side, and if you like a slightly grainier, more watercolour, it's more linen-y finish, then you can turn it over and use the other. Personally, I like the smoother side, but you can get so many layers in. I have found with some of the pencils, I am naturally heavy-handed, which I've had to really pull back on. Some of the pencils, if you've gone in with layer after layer after layer and then tried to go in with a black that's got a really sharp point, I have damaged the paper sometimes. With the Fabriano Artistico, I haven't damaged it yet. So it is worth investing in better quality paper once you've got your kind of techniques in place. The next tip, tip number 3, is to get a good quality sharpener. Now this can be really frustrating at the beginning. You can have your polychromos, you can have your Caran d'Ache luminance pencils, but if you've got a rubbish sharpener, it can still really break them and shatter the wood around it. This one is the KUM, K-U-M sharpener. Great to begin with, but it didn't take long for them to either blunt the lead. This one does come with replacements, but that's really fiddly. But it didn't take long for this one to stop working as brilliantly as it did. Got the Derwent. This is quite good if you're working somewhere that isn't your art studio or that doesn't have a bin nearby. It does catch everything, and it's okay. Another one is this one, the Derwent manual kind of rotation. I think it's the fine point, and it catches all of your sharpenings in this nifty little pull-out drawer. Again, this one, fantastic when I started. I absolutely loved it, but as time went on and I used it with different pencils, and obviously as the blades got a little bit more dull and blunt, some of the, not all of them, but some of the polychromos, it started to just eat it, and it's just, oh my goodness, it's heartbreaking to see that your pencil, a brand new pencil, slowly starts disappearing inside this pencil sharpener without without it getting a point at all. It just either kept breaking or didn't like the pencil. For younger people and for clumsy people like me, a lot safer for your fingers. But the pencil sharpener that I've been loving recently is the M+R, and I haven't had a problem yet. I've been using it for a few months now and it's fantastic. The only negative I would say with this is for smaller fingers, for younger people, it might not be the safest option, because actually it's got two options, a wide hole and a narrower hole. But when you're holding it and trying to sharpen it, obviously it's manual, I have touched the point of the blade and I've actually cut my finger, not known I've cut it because it's such a sharp blade, and then bled all over my work, which is obviously a bit of a disadvantage. So I would say that if you're going to be buying this, be very, very careful. I don't know if it's just a flaw with the one I have and whether anybody else has found this, but just something to note, just be a bit careful. My next tip number 4, is to get a good eraser and get a variety of erasers as well. I've used the normal kind of scrub it out rubber, and they tend to be, again, I'm a bit heavy handed. You can damage the paper quite easily with those. One I found that is fantastic is the Derwent electric eraser. Now you can manipulate the end into a bit of a point, which is great for getting fine details. You can pull up highlights, that kind of thing. The other thing I really use it for all of the time is to clean up any smudges around your drawings. You might find that you get a little bit of smudge, a little bit of transfer onto the paper around your drawing, and in between each stage I tend to just go in with this and just take those parts away. The other rubber I use is the Faber-Castell kneadable eraser. This is the best one I've found. I've got quite a few of these. This one's a blue colour and it's really soft, really malleable, and the other great thing with it is that it's not oily, it doesn't leave a residue on your hand, which some of them do, and you can get it to a really sharp point. Then one really great thing that I use this for is to mute out some of the harsher lines that you've done. So for example, with this shiny conker, I dabbed around the shiny area and it just picked up some of the pigment and muted it really well, so the transition between the shine and the rest of the piece was a lot softer, which was fantastic. The other thing is to use it for highlights with hair, with fur, getting in tiny detail. If you want to pick up a highlight in an eye, you can get it to a really sharp point and pick up that pigment there, which is fantastic. The other eraser that I really love is the Tombow Mono. This is a Mono Zero eraser, and this is a stick eraser, and it's tiny. You can see really, really sharp point, and so again, great for highlights, great for hair, great for fur, and those really tiny details that you can't get in with the bigger erasers. Not expensive at all. I'll list everything that I use in the description box below, but really worth buying just for a couple of quid. The next tip number 5 to improve your colour pencil drawings is to get a good reference photo. The things to watch out for reference photos is, most importantly, it's royalty free, so you can't just Google lion and draw the first lion that you see, because that photo has been taken by somebody. It's a photographer that owns that photograph, and so it's therefore under the copyright law, and you'll find yourself in lots of trouble if you then try and sell that work later on. You need to either ask permission of the photographer that took that photo, or else go to a website like Pixabay, where they're royalty free, they're all really good quality, there's a real good variety of photos on there, and on Pixabay you can buy the photographer a coffee and be then free to use that photograph to sell your work later on. The other things to watch with a good quality reference photo is that you've got a good contrast, so the lights and the darks are very, very different, and you can get a really interesting drawing. The next thing is the composition. So is it interesting? Can you crop it to make it a little bit more interesting? You're going to focus in on the eye, or is it an animal in motion, running? Obviously you are a little bit limited if you're not going to be paying for the photos. There is a really good website that you actually have to pay for, but it's probably about £5 per photograph, and they're fantastic. You can get some really good close-ups with these, and it's www.referencephotosandmore.com. The next tip for improving your colour pencil work, tip number 6, is to really take your time to get a good initial sketch, an accurate initial sketch down. Now when you're learning colour pencils, it can be really frustrating because all you want to do is get to that colouring, the rendering part, and you're quite annoyed with taking your time with the initial sketch. But it is really important that you get that sketch accurate, because no matter how good the colour pencil work is, it's going to look odd at the end. So getting that initial sketch and taking your time to do that is really, really important. important. There's lots of ways that you can do this, lots of tools and tips that artists use. One of them is to use a light box and to trace your outline to begin with if you want to concentrate on your colour pencil work. I would say that if you are going to trace, then it is really important that you just use this as a tool and not rely on it going forward, because you're not going to improve your freehand skills if you just really concentrate on tracing. Another way is using the grid method, which a lot of artists use. A disadvantage to this is that obviously you have to draw out all the grids, and I'm not quite sure how they then manage to get the grid off the paper so the paper's nice and clean afterwards, because you do have to transfer the grid onto the paper that you're going to be using. But this is a good way to get everything in the right place, the proportions right, because you're referring and drawing in small tiny sections, not looking at the whole picture, which can be quite intimidating sometimes. So that's good, possibly if you're not going to be selling the work, because it's difficult to rub out the grid lines at the end. Another way that I use quite often is really just measuring, using a bog standard ruler and measuring the height of the eye, where it is in relation to the other one, and just adding little dots in on your paper. So you're not adding the complete grid lines, which are difficult to rub out, but you're adding reference points, and then you can tell where the proportions are and the sizes and that kind of thing. Tip number 7 is to utilise the different techniques for coloured pencils. So the most important tip is to learn how to blend with coloured pencils. So lots of different methods, and I do have a video that I put together all about blending coloured pencils, the 4 main methods that I use, and that includes solvent. So you can use an odourless mineral spirit, and it tends to break down the binders in the pigment, and so it kind of dissolves it into the paper and increases the colour vibrancy, which is great. It's also a very fast technique because coloured pencils are a very, very slow medium. You can use the layering technique, and then into burnishing you can blend with white colour pencils and the other pencils that you're using. So it's really important to kind of get those techniques in place and think about the different techniques that will really help you to improve your piece in the end. The last tip I'd say, tip number 8, is to take your time. Coloured pencils are such a slow medium, and they're renowned for it, and it's really, really frustrating sometimes when you think, oh, this is taking forever. I'm in that really ugly stage where nothing looks like it's going to ever come together, but that's the beauty of it. So really taking your time out. I'm naturally a very impatient person, and I found that coloured pencils was something that I really wanted to learn because I knew it would force me to slow down, and that's sometimes a really good thing in life. When life is so busy and mad and fast, then it's great to sometimes slow down. So take your time, think about going through the layers of coloured pencils, building them up gradually. Sometimes you tend to find in the YouTube videos that you see, and mine are the same, you speed them up because otherwise it would be a 20-hour video, so it looks like it can be done in one evening, when actually it's been weeks and weeks of work. So don't be fooled by the speed drawings. Coloured pencils is a very, very slow medium. The other thing I would say is that with that frustration, you tend to call your work finished when it's not actually completely finished, and the result that you might be getting, and if you're not happy with it, of course, if that's the result that you want, that's fantastic. It's art, it's subjective, it's completely up to you. But if it's not the finish that you're wanting, then it might be that you're calling it finished too soon, and you might need to just take your time and put a few more hours in, build up the layers, think about the detail that's going in. So first of all, blocking in those colours, and then building up from light to dark, and then adding the details at the very end. You might find that your drawings, if you just spend a little bit more time on them, that they are enhanced by a massive amount. So it will pay you back tenfold with the results that you get in the long run. Okay, that's it for today's video. I really hope you found that helpful and that you got some good tips on using colour pencils. If you have any questions, then please leave those in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon just to make sure that you're notified of next videos. Share this video with your friends, and I look forward to seeing you next time.